Dear students, now let's start with our session. Just look at this map. I had given you two maps. One is Europe 1815, second one is Europe 1914. Just to compare these two maps. So what do we understand from these two maps and comparative study? I think it would be very clear for us. There were a lot of changes. There were many changes in the map of Europe or in Europe. If you see 1815 map, we had many empires. But when you refer to the 1914, this European map, there were many nation states. So what was happening in Europe? Europe was transforming. Europe was transforming from monarchies rule to that of independent states. So definitely we would be having a question in our mind, what was that force? What was the spirit that transformed Europe? How could it happen in Europe? Europe was fragmented when you see the map of 1815. And when you see 1914 map, we had many independent states. We didn't have Germany in 1815 map. Whereas in 1914 you could see Germany clearly with clear boundary. So we need to analyze in this chapter what was that force. Oh, we are actually analyzing the growth of national sentiment in Europe. And I just want to go with further detailed discussion on the entire map study, the details, various points of this analysis, comparing these two maps, Europe 1815, Europe 1914. So just follow me. So what do we understand from the map, which I have shown just now? We understand that there was no sense of belonging to a nation amongst the people. People didn't have any such national sentiment. People lived within kingdoms, small states, but not within the nations. You know, there were empires like Austrian Empire, the then Germany, which was called as Prussia, we had Russian Empire, or we had France, we had Britain. People lived in all these areas, but they didn't have a spirit called a nation. So the idea of nationalism in Europe, an idea to unify the territories, so our idea, what is called the formation of a national government, developed only over a period of time, which was not at all existing in Europe, as you see in the map. So what do we understand is that nation-making process took many decades, which involved many wars, many leaders. You might be aware of Mahatma Gandhi. You might be also aware of Giuseppe Mazzini, for example, from Italy. So we had many such leaders who sacrificed their life. We had revolutions. We had the role of revolutionaries, role of leaders, artists, writers, songs were composed, so much of literary works were composed and collected or written. So all these have played a major role in developing a national sentiment. So it is very clear for us that there was no sense of nation, but we developed the sense of nation over a period of time, especially in Europe. So dear students, we have been analyzing the map, how the changes took place. I have a very simple two questions to be asked. Number one, who brought these changes in the political map of Europe? When I say change in the political map of Europe, from no nation states to having a nation states in Europe. And the answer for that is, we had a group of intellectuals, business people, educated people who wanted to go for a change, who wanted to have a government by consent of the people than that of a government ruled by the monarchs, or what you call as monarchy. And such a group was considered as liberals. So it was liberals who wanted to go for a change. And it was these people who played a major role in inculcating the spirit of nation amongst the people, because people didn't have any such sentiment. And to develop such a sentiment of having a nation elected by them, having a territory of their own, was not an easy task. It took many years to develop that sense. And as I said earlier, it was a role of leaders, it was a role of liberals, it was a role of painters, it was a role of artists. All these people played a major role in developing this sense. And it was this sense of nationalism, it was this national spirit actually brought a sweeping change in Europe. And before we proceed further, I just want to clarify, because I have been telling you nation states, nation, nation, nation. So definitely there would be a question, what do you mean by nation states? Or what is nation all about? A nation is one in which majority of its citizens and rulers develop a sense of common identity. Take an example of India. Don't we have a fixed territory? Don't we have our own elected government? Don't we feel that we are the part of this country called India? So that spirit is called a nationalism, and that entire country can be called as a nation state. And as I said earlier, we didn't have such feeling in Europe. We didn't have such nation states in Europe. So it was liberals who played a major role initially, who played a crucial role in inculcating that spirit of nation states in Europe. Is that clear? When we analyze the emergence of national spirit in Europe, I thought I can share few ideas which are being discussed in this chapter as a whole. Let me briefly discuss all those factors all together which are being discussed in this chapter, European part, which played a major role in developing nationalism in Europe. I just want to stress on, initially as it is being discussed in your textbook, changes introduced by the French government, a newly formed government after the French Revolution. We might be also praising the role of Jacobin clubs, the role of Napoleon, the role of liberals who had two views. I'll be discussing those political view or economic view a little later. And role of revolutionary leaders, role of romanticism or culture, or role of images being created in Germany or in France. So all these factors played a major role. And this is just a summary of all the factors which played a major role in developing a sense of identity in Europe. And all these factors will be discussed one by one when we proceed further. Okay? And let's go to next issue. Hope everyone is following me. And as I said earlier, there were many factors that helped in transforming Europe into a nation state. And I just want to go for a separate case study. That is, what happened in France after 1789 revolution? What were the changes they introduced to develop a sense of identity? As all of us we know, France had gone for a revolution, but it doesn't mean that France was a nation in true sense. Yes, they had a fixed territory, they were ruled by monarchs, but now of course after the revolution people had overthrown the monarchy and they started ruling as per their own constitution. It doesn't mean that people had all the sense of national identity altogether. So many changes were introduced by the government, mainly after the French Revolution of 1789. And I have listed few changes which are also being discussed in your textbook. Number one, idea of fatherland, la patrie or la citoyenne. We created a French flag, tricolor flag. We also respected language spoken in Paris as a national language. We are also gone to the extent of removing all those internal trade barriers, introduction of uniform weights and measures. So all these steps were taken by the government after 1789 so that you can have a sense of common identity in France, mainly after the revolution. Is it clear? This is one case which is being discussed in your textbook. Apart from this, there is also a reference to the role of Napoleon through the idea called Napoleonic Code. So, though Napoleon had introduced all those changes for the sake of his administration, such changes were actually helping the French people to develop a sense of national identity. So by and large, all those changes that took place after 1789 developed a strong feeling of nation states in France, and French people thought these ideas should be spread to other parts of Europe too, because other parts of Europe were ruled by the monarchs. So monarchy should be overthrown, and we should go for, or we should, when I say we, it stood for France. France should help other countries to go for a revolution, to go for establishment of nation states. And that's why you could see the role of Jacobin clubs being referred again in the textbook. Is it clear? So let's proceed further. So we understood that there were no nation states in Europe. Germany, Russia, Austria, Italy, all were divided into kingdoms. It means they were fragmented. They were ruled by monarchs, within the territories of which lived diverse people. They didn't see themselves as sharing a collective identity or a common culture. They spoke different languages and they belonged to different ethnic groups. I just want to prove all these statements by taking an example of Austro-Hungarian Empire, which is being discussed in your textbook. Look at the map which I have given here. If you look at the map, the then Austro-Hungarian map, or the territory, or an empire, you can see they had different people. Kingdom had people who were of various ethnic groups. Were speaking Poles, you can see that in the map. Italians, especially on the eastern side, you can see them. Germans we had, Serbs, Romanians, Croats. So, to be frank, Austria-Hungarian Empire, though it was under the control of a monarch, was actually a fragmented territory. There was no such sense of unity. There was no such feeling of nation at all. Austrian or Hungarian Empire was a cluster of many people of various culture. So definitely the question arises here, as I said earlier, how such a fragmented Europe developed a national sentiment. As I said earlier, it was the role of liberals initially. So let's proceed and analyze the role of liberals. What were those two views which I mentioned earlier in detail? Okay, let's proceed to that. So let's discuss the role of liberals. We have been mentioning the liberals in the previous slides too. Before proceeding, what were those two views of the liberals? I just want to clarify who are the liberals. Liberals were educated people. Liberals were industrialists. Liberals were business people. Liberals were professionals. So, group of all such people can be called as liberals. And it was among these liberal-minded people who were educated, who were businessmen, who were industrialists, that the idea of national sentiment, the spirit of national unity, gained popularity in Europe. As I said, they had two views: political view, economic view. When I talk about political view, it was a government by consent for the liberals. Government by consent means government should rule as per the constitution. It doesn't mean that everybody had the right to vote. You know that. In Europe, everyone didn't have right to vote. Women didn't have right to vote. Non-propertied men didn't have right to vote. They organized protests for right to equality, or especially for political rights, but that was not given to them. But however, initially, please remember, when I say liberals' political view, government by consent, it was a government that should be ruled as per the constitution. Doesn't mean everybody had right to vote. Please remember that. Okay, that was one of the views. And the second view was economic view. What is this? What was this economic view? Freedom of market and abolition of trade restrictions. So free movement of goods and service and capital within the territory. Now, why should we refer this freedom of market or free movement of goods or capital? It clearly tells us that there were many restrictions within the fixed territory. I just want to give an example which is being referred in your textbook of Germany, of Prussia. There was an attempt to create what is called customs union, Zollverein. Customs union or Zollverein could be called as a precursor of European Union, which you know today. Now, what was happening in Zollverein? Germany tried to abolish a lot of trade restrictions. They tried to introduce uniform weights and measures to some extent. The intention was to have a smooth trade. But in the process of removing all those trade restrictions, Germany indirectly inculcated the spirit of oneness. And that is why it is said in the textbook. So, this economic view of what is called abolition of trade restrictions initially had contributed for the developing of sense of oneness, and finally leading to what is called a nationalism or national identity in Germany in later stage. So there is a beautiful statement given in your textbook that wave of economic nationalism strengthened the wider national sentiment in Germany at that time. So please remember, economic view, yeah, it was for trade purposes, but in due course of time, these type of removal of trade restrictions helped in the development of national sentiment in Europe. Or I'm mainly referring national sentiment in Germany. So Germany developed national sentiment in later stage. So thanks to the liberals' economic view too, or what is called the idea of Zollverein. Is that clear? So there were two views of liberals: politically, government by consent; economically, remove trade restrictions. And look at these two major ideas. These two major ideas actually laid the foundation for developing national sentiment. People thought, okay, we should have a government by our own. Yes, we should have less trade restrictions. So that brought people together. Is it clear? So please remember the role of liberals in developing national identity. I have just taken the example of Germany as it is given in your textbook. So this could be asked for the exam too. Role of liberals in developing national sentiment, political view, economic view. Politically, government by consent. Economically, free trade. Is it clear? And let's proceed further with more ideas. So dear students, before we end today's class, I just want to clarify on few more issues. You know, we studied so far how Europe transformed from fragmented to the idea of national sentiment. We are not totally created nation states in Europe, but we are just in the process of learning the growth of national sentiment in Europe. We also stressed the role of liberals. Liberals had two views, political or economic view. You know, these type of initiatives were not liked by a group of people. And 100% sure you would be guessing that group of people who didn't like liberals' initiative. And that was the conservatives. Or you can simply call monarchs. These monarchs, take an example, then Germany called Prussia, Austria, Hungary, or Russia and Britain, all were ruled by conservatives. They didn't want to allow liberal sentiment to be, growing so much, because if that was the case, definitely in due course of time, these conservatives would be losing their power. So they didn't want to lose power. And mainly after Battle of Waterloo, after defeating Napoleon in 1815, these conservatives have regained their power. They divided most parts of Europe amongst themselves, especially Prussia, Austria, Hungary, Russia and Britain. They wanted to dominate in Europe. They never tolerated any such liberal sentiment, the liberal views. They didn't tolerate criticism. They imposed series of restrictions on liberal activities. So you could see there were a clear clash between conservatives and liberals. So when conservatives started imposing a lot of restrictions like this, there was a group who had gone for such activities, who wanted to unify their territories, and such group we call them as revolutionaries. And there is a reference to the role of Giuseppe Mazzini in Italy in the textbook, a revolutionary leader. He laid the foundation for such revolutionary activities in Europe. First in Italy, then of course such revolutionary clubs were formed in major parts of Europe, like Young Italy. There is a reference to Young Europe. So I hope you understood the clear growth of national sentiment from fragmented to the sense of national identity. And we stress mainly a case of France, then we refer the case of mainly Europe with special reference to Austria-Hungary, and also we stress the role of liberals and how the liberal sentiment was not liked by the conservatives, leading to the rise of revolutionary tendency in Europe. In our next module, we'll be discussing some other issues. So please listen to all the statements made in each part of this presentation, and also refer your textbooks to understand in a better way. I will see you in the next module with few more aspects of this chapter. Thank you very much.